Welcome to our chilling adventure into the unknown. Tonight, we delve into the spine-tingling tale of John, an avid hiker who ventured into a mysterious forest known for its dark legends and unsettling occurrences. Armed with nothing but his gear and a fearless spirit, John set out to explore a place where reality and myth intertwine. What began as a routine camping trip soon escalated into a harrowing encounter with something beyond comprehension. Join us as we unravel this eerie story of courage, fear, and the unknown. Be prepared, this is not just another hike in the woods. John was an avid hiker and loved spending time in nature. He always sought out new places for his hikes and explored the most remote corners of forests. His friends often joked that he was probably a bear in his past life. This time, John decided to venture into a forest about which he had heard many legends and myths. The locals claimed that strange things happened there, but John, as always, didn't believe in tales and legends. His backpack was carefully packed. A tent, sleeping bag, food, water, and of course, a flashlight and knife. John knew that anything could happen in the forest and was prepared for any difficulties. He chose a secluded spot where he planned to set up camp and set off. Early in the morning, the forest greeted him with silence and coolness. Tall trees created a dense shade, and sunlight barely broke through the canopy. John walked along a narrow path, enjoying the nature and feeling how with each step he was moving further and further away from civilization. He heard the singing of birds and the rustle of leaves underfoot, and it soothed him. After walking several kilometers, John found the perfect spot for his camp. It was a small clearing surrounded by tall trees, with a small stream flowing nearby. He quickly set up his tent, built a fire, and prepared lunch. The evening promised to be quiet and peaceful. John sat by the fire, watching the dancing flames and listening to the sounds of the forest. Night fell quickly, bringing darkness with it. The forest, which seemed so friendly during the day, transformed at night. The sounds became more muted, and it seemed that the darkness concealed something sinister. John was not one to easily succumb to fear. He knew that the forest at night was a place where one could hear many strange sounds. Cries of night birds, rustling leaves, animal noises. He sat calmly by the fire, sipping hot tea from a thermos when he suddenly heard something unusual. It was a quiet but distinct rustling sound coming from the depths of the forest. John listened, but the sound quickly faded. He decided it was probably just animals and continued enjoying his evening. However, a few minutes later, the rustling repeated, this time closer and louder. John tensed. He stood up and directed his flashlight towards the sound. The beam of light cut through the trees, illuminating the thick foliage, but he saw nothing unusual. The sound ceased, and John sat back by the fire. But his peace was disturbed, and he began to listen intently to every sound. Time passed. The night grew darker, and the rustling continued. It seemed that someone or something was sneaking around his camp, remaining unseen. John picked up his flashlight again and slowly walked around the camp, trying to find the source of the sounds. But the forest seemed empty. Returning to the fire, he felt a strange sense of unease. Something was wrong, and he knew it. He heard the rustling again, this time very close, and his heart started pounding harder. For a long time, they found nothing unusual. But then one of his friends noticed something strange. On the ground were tracks that couldn't belong to a human or an animal. Huge footprints led deeper into the forest. The friends decided to follow them, hoping to find more evidence. The tracks led them further and further, until they came across an old, abandoned cabin. The cabin was covered in moss and looked very old. They went inside and found many strange symbols drawn on the walls. In a corner lay old books and items that resembled ritualistic objects. It seemed that this place had been abandoned long ago, but the tracks led directly here. They began exploring the cabin, taking photos and recording everything they saw. At one point, one of the friends noticed fresh tracks on the floor leading to the back door. They followed them and emerged into a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. In the center of the clearing stood the very creature John had seen. It was enormous, covered in black fur, standing motionless and staring at them. The friends froze in horror, not knowing what to do. The creature didn't move, but its presence was terrifying. One of the friends tried to take a step forward, but the creature let out a loud roar, and they all stepped back. John and his friends froze in terror, not knowing what to do. The creature didn't move, but its roar paralyzed them with fear. Finally, one of the friends suggested retreating and returning to the car. But as they began to slowly back away, the creature took a step forward. John realized there was no time to think. He grabbed his friend's hand and pulled him along, shouting at the others to run. The group dashed away from the clearing, hearing the creature's heavy footsteps behind them. Panic engulfed everyone as they ran. Heedless of the path, the forest seemed endless, with each turn revealing new obstacles. John constantly looked back to ensure all his friends were following. However, one of them, Tom, had fallen behind, tripping over a tree root. John stopped to help him, but the creature was too close. Tom tried to stand, but his legs gave way from fear and exhaustion. The creature caught up with him, and John heard his scream of terror before the forest swallowed the sounds again. John's heart broke with guilt and helplessness, but he knew he had to keep running to save the others. The remaining group emerged into a small clearing where their car was parked. John shouted at his friends to get in quickly, but the creature was already approaching. They managed to scramble into the car and start the engine just as they saw the creature break out of the forest. The car sped away, leaving the terrifying creature behind. The friends drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts and feelings. They understood they had lost Tom, and this feeling haunted them all the way home. John was devastated. He felt guilty for bringing his friends to that forest and for not being able to save Tom. He knew his life would never be the same, and the memories of that night would haunt him for the rest of his days. Returning to town, they reported the incident to the authorities, but their story seemed too incredible. The police conducted an investigation, but found no traces of the creature or Tom. John and his friends became outcasts, considered crazy, and no one believed their tale. Time passed, but John couldn't come to terms with the loss. He kept returning to that forest, trying to find any answers. Each time he came back empty-handed, but his belief that what happened was real never faded. One night, John decided to return to the cabin alone. He felt he needed to finish what he had started. The night was dark and moonless, and the forest greeted him with a grim silence. John walked along familiar paths. Feeling fear gradually take hold of him, he found the cabin and entered. Everything was in its place, just as it had been the day they first found it. John began searching for clues that could lead him to answers, but it was all in vain. Suddenly, he heard a familiar rustling behind him. He turned around and saw the creature standing in the doorway. It looked at him with the same empty eyes, and John felt fear engulf him. He realized this was the end. The creature stepped forward, and John felt his willpower leave him. In his last moments, John thought about his friends and Tom. He knew they wouldn't forget him and would remember what he tried to do. John closed his eyes, and the creature took the final step the next morning. The police found his backpack and personal belongings at the cabin, but John himself was never found. His disappearance became another dark legend about that forest, and locals said the spirits of the forest took him for trying to uncover their secrets. Time passed, but the memory of John and his friends lived on in the hearts of those who knew them. The forest remained a dark and mysterious place, and everyone who dared to enter it felt enveloped by fear and anxiety. John's story became a warning to all who sought to learn more about nature's secrets. The forest and its inhabitants preferred to remain in the shadows, and attempts to penetrate their world could have tragic consequences. Thus ended the life of John, the brave explorer who became a victim of his love for nature and desire to uncover its secrets. His name became a legend, but his fate remained an eternal mystery, hidden in the dark forests